The wind howled across the frozen plains. Daniel sat inside his small tent, listening to the thin fabric shake with every gust. The light from his lantern flickered on the metal stove where a pot of water slowly warmed. Outside, the snowstorm was thick, covering everything in a blanket of white. It was the kind of night when no one should be out, not even the local hunters. Daniel had been living on this alien world for months, trading supplies with a nearby outpost. It was lonely work, but he had grown used to the silence. Most nights passed without anything unusual, but tonight felt different. There was a strange tension in the air, like the storm was hiding something. A sound broke through the window. Soft, quick tapping. At first, Daniel thought it was just snow or ice falling from the ridge. But then it came again, steady, almost like knocking. He turned his head toward the tent's entrance, frowning. No one should be here, not at this hour, not in this weather. Slowly, Daniel moved toward the flap, his boots crunching on the thin layer of frost inside the tent. He reached out and unzipped the entrance, the cold air rushing in and biting at his skin. There, standing in the snow, was a figure. It was small, slender, wrapped in a torn piece of cloth that barely looked warm enough to cover her shoulders. She was an alien, that much was clear even in the dim light. Her skin was pale with a faint silver hue. Her hair long and tangled, strange markings ran along her cheeks, glowing faintly like soft blue ink. Her eyes were wide, almost too large for her face, and they shimmered in the dark. Her voice was quiet, shaking as she spoke. "Please, can I come in?" Just for warmth, Daniel hesitated. He had been told by traders to never let locals into a shelter at night. Not because they were all dangerous, but because some carried trouble with them, trouble that could kill a man. He looked at her. Again, her lips trembling, her hands clutching the torn cloth tighter around her body. Gust of icy wind whipped through, making her stumble slightly. "Please," she whispered again. Something in her voice cut through his doubt. He stepped aside, motioning her in. She ducked into the tent, her bare feet silent on the floor mat. The warmth from the stove made her sigh softly, but her eyes kept moving, scanning every corner of the tent. Daniel handed her a thick blanket. "Here, wrap this around you," he said. She obeyed, but didn't relax. Instead, she sat close to the stove, her knees drawn to her chest, her eyes still darting around. Her hands were shaking, but Daniel couldn't tell if it was from the cold or something else. Storm's bad tonight. Daniel tried to start a conversation. She gave a small nod, but said nothing. The silence between them was heavy. After a few moments, Daniel poured hot water into a cup and offered it to her. She looked at it, but didn't take it. Instead, she glanced at him, her eyes narrowing slightly. "I can't drink this," she said softly. "Not yet." Her voice was strange, not just an accent, but in the way it carried a mix of fear and caution. Daniel noticed that her markings seemed to glow brighter when she spoke. It was subtle, but the lantern light caught it. He leaned back a little, unsure if it was something natural or something dangerous. "You're far from the outpost," he said. "Where are you coming from?" Her gaze dropped to the ground. "I can't say," she whispered. "It's safer if you don't know." Daniel frowned. That answer made no sense. Safer for him not to know. He wanted to press her, but the look on her face stopped him. It was the look of someone who had been running for a long time, someone who didn't have the strength to keep explaining. Outside, the wind howled again. Then, faintly, Daniel thought he heard something else. Voices muffled by the snow. He froze, listening carefully. The girl's head snapped toward the tent wall, her eyes wide. "They're close," she whispered, her voice trembling. Daniel's stomach tightened. "Who?" he asked, but she didn't answer. Instead, she moved closer to him, clutching the blanket tighter. "If they find me here," she said, her voice barely audible, "you'll be in danger too." Daniel's mind raced. What had he just let into his tent? The muffled voices outside grew a little louder before fading again. The girl didn't relax, not even when the sound was gone. She glanced at the entrance flap, then at him. Her breathing was fast, uneven. Daniel didn't know if it was from the cold or pure fear. He was about to speak when she reached into her clothing and pulled something out, a small crystal. No bigger than a coin. It shimmered faintly. Like frozen light trapped inside, she held it tightly, almost protectively. "If I lose this," she whispered, "I lose everything." Daniel stared at the crystal. He didn't know what it was, but in that moment he realized something. This girl hadn't come to his tent just to warm up. She was carrying something far more dangerous than frostbite. And whatever it was, someone out there wanted it badly enough to come looking in the middle of a deadly storm. The small crystal lay in the alien girl's hand. Glowing faintly in the dim lantern light, Daniel stared at it, feeling the air in the tent grow heavier. He didn't understand what it was, but the way she held it told him it was important. Too important, she tucked the crystal back inside the folds of her torn clothes, hiding it close to her skin. Then she pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Still sitting near the stove, the heat from the small flame was enough to warm the air, but she kept shivering. Daniel wasn't sure if it was from the cold outside or the fear inside her. "Who's looking for you?" Daniel asked carefully. She glanced at him, her glowing markings flickering slightly. "They are soldiers," she said softly. "Not from the outpost. From the north." Her voice was almost a whisper, as if speaking louder might bring them. "Here faster. They serve someone who wants this crystal," she added, "and they will kill to get it." Daniel leaned back slightly, thinking this wasn't the kind of trouble he had planned on finding tonight. He had survived on this frozen world by keeping his head down and avoiding local politics. Now, with one choice letting her inside, he might have already stepped too far into something dangerous. The girl's eyes followed his movements carefully. It wasn't the look of someone asking for kindness. It was the look of someone testing whether they could trust him. "I didn't come here by accident," she admitted quietly. "I was told there might be a human. One who would help." Daniel frowned. He didn't like the sound of that. "Who told you that?" he asked, but she shook her head. "If I say the name, they will know you spoke to me. And then you'll never be safe again." The wind outside roared louder, shaking the tent walls. Daniel poured himself a cup of hot water and took a sip. He offered it to her again, but she didn't touch it. Instead, she moved closer to him, closer than before, her silver eyes fixed on his face. "You are warm," she murmured, almost to herself. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. She wasn't just sitting close to share heat. Her eyes studied every line of his face, like she was trying to read a secret hidden in his expression. It was unsettling. "You should rest," he said, breaking the silence. "The storm will pass by morning." But she didn't lie down. Instead, she asked, "Do you have family? Someone waiting for you back home?" Daniel hesitated. "No," he said at last. "No one waiting." Her gaze softened for just a moment. But then she looked away. "Good," she said quietly. "That means no one can be used against you." Daniel froze at her words. That wasn't something people said casually. She was speaking like someone who had seen others suffer for helping her. "Why would someone use my family?" he asked slowly. Her answer was simple, but heavy. "Because you will be hunted now." The words hit him harder than the cold wind outside. He opened his mouth to argue, but she held up her hand for silence. She tilted her head, listening. Daniel strained his ears and, then he heard it too. A faint crunching sound, slow, deliberate, coming from somewhere in the snow. "They came back," she whispered. Her hands clutched the blanket tightly. Daniel moved quietly to the stove, turning down the flame so the light dimmed. The inside of the tent fell into a shadowy glow. Outside, the sound of footsteps drew closer. Stopping just beyond the tent wall, Daniel could see a faint outline through. The thin fabric, a tall figure, standing still. Another shape appeared beside it. And then a third. The girl's breathing grew faster. Her silver eyes wide, the muffled sound of alien voices carried through the wind, low and sharp. Daniel didn't understand the language, but the tone was unmistakable anger. Command, threat, one. Of the shadows moved, pressing a hand against the tent wall. Daniel's pulse quickened. He grabbed the handle of his knife. Just in case, but after a tense moment, the hand pulled away. The voices faded again. The crunch of snow growing distant. Only the howl of the wind remained. The girl stayed frozen for a while longer. As if afraid to believe they were gone, finally. She exhaled slowly. They will search again. She said quietly, they never stop. Daniel looked at her. You need to tell me exactly what you're carrying. He said, if I'm already in danger, I should know why. She hesitated. Then nodded. The crystal is a key, she said. It can open something that has been closed for generations. A place my people have almost forgotten. Her voice was soft but carried weight. And you? Daniel asked. She met his gaze. I am the one meant to carry it there. But I cannot do it alone. Daniel didn't answer immediately. He had been on this frozen planet to trade, to explore, to keep to himself. Now, in the space of one night, he had somehow become part of a mission that sounded far bigger than he could handle. Yet when he looked at her shivering but determined, he knew one thing. If he sent her out into the storm now, she wouldn't survive. He sighed, setting his cup down. All right, he said, you can stay until morning. A flicker of relief crossed her face, but it was quickly replaced by caution. Morning won't be enough. She said, they will keep coming until I am either theirs or gone. Daniel stared at her. Somehow, he knew she wasn't speaking in fear, she was speaking in truth. And for the first time since she entered his tent, he realized. This was no ordinary night, and she was no ordinary visitor. The storm outside had eased, but the wind still carried a bitter chill through the fabric of the tent. Daniel sat with his back against the supply crate, staring at the alien girl wrapped. In his blanket, her eyes were half closed, but he could tell she wasn't asleep. She was listening, always listening, like a wild creature that expected danger at any second. The silence was broken by a sudden sound. Crunch. Slow, heavy footsteps in the snow. Daniel's hand tightened around his knife instinctively. The girl's head turned sharply toward the sound. Her markings glowing faintly in the dim light. There. Here, she whispered. Her voice wasn't panicked, was sharp. Certain, Daniel moved quietly to the lantern, lowering the flame even more until the tent was cloaked in shadow. Outside, the footsteps came closer, the crunch of snow, deliberate and unhurried, whoever it was. They weren't in a hurry because they were confident. A tall shadow passed across the tent wall, its outline distorted by the thin fabric. Another figure joined it, this one broader. Daniel's heart beat hard in his chest. The voices began again deep. Harsh, speaking in a language he didn't know. But the girl's face tightened at each word, as if she understood every syllable. What are they saying? Daniel whispered. They're giving each other directions, she murmured. They're searching the area. They think I came this way. She glanced at him, her silver eyes reflecting the faint lantern light. If they find me here, they'll kill you first. Daniel almost laughed at how casually she said it, but there was no humor in her face. Her gaze shifted to the entrance flap. Then, without warning, she reached out and grabbed his wrist. Promise me, she said urgently, if they come. In you don't fight, you run. Daniel pulled his hand back, frowning. I don't run from anyone, he said. Her expression darkened. You don't understand. They're not here to take me alive, and they're not here to leave witnesses. The shadows moved away from the tent, their footsteps circling slowly. Daniel could feel the weight of their presence even without seeing their faces. The girl stayed perfectly still, barely breathing, after a long moment. The voices faded into the distance. The crunch of snow became softer, until there was nothing but the wind again. Daniel let out a slow breath, but the girl didn't relax. "They'll be back," she said, her voice low. "They never stop until the job is done." Daniel leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "You need to tell me the truth," he said. "All of it." She hesitated, her fingers curling tightly around the edge of the blanket. Then she nodded slowly. "The crystal I carry is not just a key," she said. "It is a claima. Proof of right to lead my people." Daniel blinked. "You're telling me you're, what, some kind of princess?" Her lips tightened. "I was meant to be," she said, "but my uncle stole the throne. He told everyone I died in the north, and he sent soldiers to make sure it became true." She reached into her clothes again, pulling out the crystal. It glimmered like a piece of frozen starlight in her palm. "This proves I am alive, and that I am the rightful ruler," she said. "If I can reach the great sanctuary, my people will know the truth." Daniel stared at the tiny object. It was hard to believe something so small could cause so much danger. But when he looked into her eyes, he saw no trace of doubt. "And these soldiers?" he asked. "They are his," she said simply. "They will not return to him without proof of my death." The weight of her words sank into him. This wasn't just about sheltering a stranger from a storm. This was about defying someone powerful enough to send killers into the night. Daniel rubbed a hand over his face. "Why come to me?" he asked. "There are others who might help." She shook her head. "Humans are rare here," she said. "The sanctuary's gate is locked by an old code, one that needs a human's touch to open." Daniel stared at her. "You're saying this whole thing is because of me?" "Yes," she said. "You can open it. And they know it." Before Daniel could reply, a sound split the air outside loud, sharp and close. A flare of blue light flashed through the tent fabric. The girl's head jerked toward it, her eyes wide, there marking the area. She said, "They've found our trail." Daniel's stomach nodded. The soldiers weren't just searching, they were closing in. The girl stood, pulling the blanket from her shoulders and letting it drop. She was still trembling, but there was a hard edge in her voice now. "We need to leave before sunrise," she said. "If we stay here, they will trap us." Daniel grabbed his pack, stuffing in whatever supplies he could reach. "Where do we go?" he asked. She pointed toward the dark outline of the hills. "In the distance, there are caves there. Hidden from above," she said. "We can rest there before we move to the sanctuary." Daniel glanced at the stove and the lantern. If they left now, they'd be walking into the storm again. But if they stayed, the soldiers would be waiting. He pulled on his coat. "All right," he said. "Let's go." The girl took one last look around the tent. Then she stepped to the flap. For a moment, she paused, her silver eyes meeting his. "You saved me tonight," she said softly. "But from here on, you'll be saving yourself too." And with that, she pushed the flap aside. Stepping into the icy darkness, Daniel followed, the wind cutting into his face. Somewhere out there in the snow, unseen eyes were watching, and he knew this night was far from over. The snow crunched under Daniel's boots as he followed the alien girl into the night. The wind whipped at his coat, biting through the layers like icy knives. Above them, the sky was a pale blur, the storm clouds glowing faintly. From the moons behind them, the world felt empty. But Daniel knew it wasn't. Somewhere in that frozen darkness, the soldiers were moving too. They kept low, weaving between snowdrifts and jagged ice formations. The girl's steps were light and quick, almost too quick for Daniel to keep up. Every few seconds, she glanced over her shoulder, scanning the darkness. Her silver eyes reflected the faint light, making her seem almost otherworldly in the snow. Daniel's breath came out in sharp clouds. He wasn't used to running in this. Cold for so long? How far? He asked between breaths. Not far, she replied, but we must move faster. They'll track our heat. Daniel didn't like the sound of that. Back on Earth, trackers could follow footprints or scent butt heat. He didn't want to think about the kind of technology these soldiers had. A sudden flash of blue light lit the snow behind them. The girl's head jerked around, her expression tense. "They've found where we left," she said, her voice urgent. Daniel didn't need more explanation. He could see dark figures moving in the distance now, their shapes barely visible in the storm. The chase had begun. "Run," she said. Grabbing his arm and pulling him forward, Daniel pushed his legs harder. The icy wind burning his lungs. The ground dipped sharply ahead, leading into a narrow path between high ice walls. The girl darted into it without hesitation. The walls gave them shelter from the wind, but they also trapped them. There was only one way forward. And one way back. Behind them, the shouts of the soldiers echoed through the narrow pass. Daniel's grip on his pack tightened. He knew if they caught them here, there'd be no escape. The girl turned sharply at a split in the path, leading them through a twisting tunnel of ice. The blue glow of the soldiers' trackers flickered on the walls behind them. Growing closer, a blast of energy struck the ice just to Daniel's left. Shards exploded outward, slicing his cheek. He ducked instinctively, his heart pounding. The girl pulled him onward, weaving through the tunnels like she knew them by memory. But the sound of footsteps was still behind them, closer than before. They burst out into an open stretch where the ground sloped upward toward a line of jagged cliffs. Daniel's legs ached, but he forced himself to keep moving. Halfway up, the girl stopped suddenly. Grabbing his arm, "Wait," she hissed. "Listen." Daniel froze, his ears straining. The soldiers' footsteps were gone. The only sound was the low, deep rumble of something heavy moving beneath the snow. "What is that?" Danielle whispered. Her eyes went wide. Not soldiers. Something worse. The ground beneath them trembled. A dark shape surged upward from the snow behind them. Massive, fur-covered beast with long claws and a mouth full of jagged teeth. Its roar shook the air. Echoing through the cliffs, the girl didn't hesitate. "This way," she shouted, sprinting toward a narrow crack in the cliffside. Daniel followed, the beast's claws tearing through the snow just meters behind him. The creature was faster than anything that big should be. Its hot breath rolled over Daniel's back as he dove into the narrow opening. The girl pulled him deeper inside, the walls of the cave scraping against their shoulders. The beast tried to squeeze in after them, but its massive body was too wide. It roared in frustration, its claws scraping at the entrance. Sending ice raining down, the girl leaned against the wall, her chest rising and falling rapidly. Daniel's own heartbeat thundered in his ears. That was not in the plan, he said, catching his breath. She gave a small, tense smile. "It was either them or it," she said, nodding toward the sounds of soldiers shouting somewhere in the distance. Daniel realized the beast had bought them a few precious minutes. Soldiers would have to deal with it before following them. The girl led him deeper into the cave, the narrow walls eventually opening into a hidden chamber. A faint glow came from crystalline formations on the walls. Lighting the space in a cold blue light, Daniel ran his hand along the rough surface. It with solid ice, ancient and unmoving. "This will hide us for a while," she said, sitting on a flat rock, "but we can't stay long." Daniel sat opposite her, his breath still uneven. He looked at her closely. The silver glow in her eyes, reflecting the cave's light. "You've been running like this for a long time, haven't you?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "All my life feels like running," she said softly. From one cold night to the next, always looking over my shoulder. For a moment, the tension eased, but then she straightened, her voice firm again. When we leave here, we'll head for the sanctuary's path. And once we're on it, there's no turning back. Daniel didn't like the sound of that finality, but he didn't see any other choice. If he left her now, she'd be dead within hours, and he wasn't the kind of man to walk away from that. Deeper in the cave, a low rumble echoed. Daniel's hand went to his knife. But the girl shook her head. Not an animal, she said quietly. The ice. It's shifting. Her voice was calm, but her eyes weren't. Daniel realized she wasn't afraid of the ice falling. She was afraid of what might come through it. Somewhere outside, the roar of the beast mixed with the distant shouts of soldiers. The chase wasn't over. It had only paused, and when it started again, Daniel knew it would be faster, louder, and far more dangerous. The cave was silent, except for the faint crackle of ice shifting in the distance. Daniel sat with his back against the cold wall, watching the alien girl as she studied the tunnel. Entrance. Her breathing had slowed, but she was still alert, still ready to move at the first sound. The light from the glowing crystals in the walls reflected in her silver eyes, making them seem brighter, almost alive. You said that thing you carry is a key, Daniel said quietly. Her gaze flicked toward him, then back to the shadows. Yes, she replied. But it is more than that. She reached into her clothing again, pulling out the small crystal he had seen before. It shimmered faintly in her hand, the light shifting like trapped stars inside it. Daniel leaned forward. What does it open? He asked. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned the crystal slowly in her fingers, as if remembering something from long ago. This, she said softly, is the heart of the sanctuary. Daniel raised an eyebrow. That's supposed to mean something to me. It should, she replied, because the sanctuary cannot be reached without it. And even with it, only a human can unlock the final seal. Daniel froze. There's that human thing again, he said. Why? She held his gaze. Because the sanctuary was not built by my people, was built by yours. The words hit him like a blast of cold air. That doesn't make sense, Daniel said. Humans only came to this planet a few decades ago. She shook her head. No, humans came here long before your records say. Long before even my people were free. Daniel's mind spun. If what she was saying was true, it meant human history in this galaxy was far older than anyone admitted. And it meant that whatever this sanctuary was, it was connected to him in ways he couldn't understand yet. She cupped the crystal in her palms and breathed on it softly. The glow inside grew brighter until it spilled into the air between them, forming a faint holographic image, a map. Daniel leaned closer, seeing clusters of stars and lines connecting them. One path was marked in glowing gold, leading to a single, isolated point. That's where we must go, she said, pointing at the glowing mark. It lies beyond the ice plains, hidden beneath the mountains. Daniel studied the map. Looks far, he said. It is, she replied, and the path is dangerous. But if we reach it, I can take back what was stolen from me. Daniel sat back, letting out a slow breath. So this whole chase. Those soldiers. They're after that little rock because it's their only way to stop you from getting there. Yes, she said simply. And because if I reach it, their master loses everything. Her eyes lowered for a moment, the hard edge in her voice softening. My mother carried this crystal before me, she said quietly. She never made it to the sanctuary. She died protecting it. Daniel felt a weight settle in his chest. I'm sorry, he said. She shook her head. Don't be sorry, just help me finish what she started. Daniel rubbed his hands together. You keep saying only a human can open it. How do you know that? Her lips curled into the faintest smile. Because I tried. And it rejected me. Daniel frowned. Rejected you? Like, locked you out? Her expression grew serious again. Worse, it turned against me, I think. Gate nearly killed me for trying to pass without the right one beside me. The thought made him uneasy. So if I come with you, I'm basically a living key. Yes, she said, without hesitation. But you are also more than that. You are a choice. He tilted his head. A choice. She nodded. The sanctuary will only open if the human inside chooses to help the one who carries the heart. If you refuse, it will close forever. Daniel let the words sink in. So not only was he the only one who could help her, he could also choose to end her mission completely. That kind of power made him uncomfortable. But when he looked at her, he saw more than just someone running for her life. He saw someone carrying the weight of her people's future on her shoulders. Before he could answer, a faint sound echoed from the cave entrance a low, metallic scrape. The girl's head snapped. Toward it, they've found the trail, she whispered. Daniel's grip tightened on his pack. How many? He asked. Enough, she said. Too many to fight. She stood quickly. Slipping the crystal back into her clothing, Daniel got to his feet, his muscles stiff from the cold. Where do we go now? He asked. She pointed toward a narrow tunnel at the back of the chamber. That way leads deeper. There is a river of ice beneath the mountain. It'll take us closer to the sanctuary. Daniel followed her into the tunnel. The glow from the walls fading as they moved deeper. The air grew colder, sharper, until each breath felt like swallowing. Knives behind them, the distant echoes of the soldiers' voices carried through the cave. Growing louder, Daniel's steps quickened, matching hers as they moved. Daniel realized something. Every step forward was taking him farther from safety, farther from the life he had before this night. But it was also taking him deeper into something much bigger than himself. And now? He wasn't sure he wanted to turn back. The girl glanced at him as they ran. When we reach the sanctuary, she said, I will need you to choose. Daniel met her eyes in the dim light. I've already made my choice, he said. I'm not leaving you to face this alone for the first time since they met. She smiled, not a small, guarded smile, but something warmer, almost hopeful. And in that cold, dangerous tunnel, Daniel realized he had just sealed his fate. Asterisk, the tunnel sloped downward. The icy floor slick under Daniel's boots. Each step echoed softly, the sound swallowed by the cold air. The alien girl moved ahead of him, her light steps sure and quick, even in the darkness. The faint glow of the crystal walls had faded, leaving only the dim reflection from the small lantern Daniel carried. The air grew sharper, colder, biting at his face. Every breath came out as a white cloud before disappearing into the blackness. Behind them, the faint echo of voices still carried through the stone. They were distant, but Daniel knew the soldiers were closing in. Every second counted now. The girl slowed and motioned for him to follow her along a narrow ledge to the left. The rock wall curved upward, covered in frost, to the right. An endless drop into shadow. Daniel kept his back to the wall, moving carefully. One wrong step and he'd vanish into the dark below. The ledge ended at a sharp bend, where the sound of water filled the air. It wasn't rushing water, it was deep, slow, and heavy. They stepped into a chamber where a river of dark, frozen water cut through the ice. Mist rose from its surface, glowing faintly in the cold light. This is the Underriver, she said quietly. It runs for miles beneath the mountains, and it will take us closer to the sanctuary. Daniel eyed the dark water. Closer, how? She pointed to a small, narrow craft made of dark metal resting on the icy shore. We followed the current, she said. It is the fastest way, and the hardest to track. Daniel wasn't sure about traveling in an open boat with enemies behind them. But the sound of echoing voices made the choice for him. They climbed in, the girl taking the front while Daniel sat at the back, using A short pole to push away from the ice, the current caught them quickly. Pulling them into the slow, deep flow, the tunnel around them widened. The ceiling disappearing into darkness. The air was colder here. But still and silent except for the sound of the water, Daniel kept his eyes on the shadows, half expecting to see movement in the blackness. The girl sat facing forward, her posture tense. "You've done this before?" Daniel said softly. She shook her head. "No, I have only heard the stories." "Of those who tried," Daniel frowned. "Tried, and what? Made it?" She glanced over her shoulder at him. "Tried, and vanished, before." He could ask more. A deep sound echoed through the waterlow, almost like a growl. The girl's head snapped toward the noise. Daniel gripped the pole tightly. "What was that?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she said, "Stay away from the edge." "Whatever you do," something rippled the surface beside them. Daniel leaned slightly to look. But the water was too dark to see anything beneath. The girl whispered something in her own language, her voice barely audible over the soft sound of the current. Then the ripple came again, closer, faster. A sudden splash broke the silence as something large brushed against the side of the boat, rocking it dangerously. Daniel shifted his weight, steadying them. "What is it?" he demanded. She finally answered. "A watcher. The river has guardians." Daniel didn't like the way she said that, like the thing in the water wasn't just an animal. The creature circled them once more before sliding back into the depths. The current began to speed up, carrying them deeper into the tunnel. The glow from the icy mist was fading, replaced by pure darkness. Daniel could only see the faint outline of the girl's head in front of him. Her voice carried softly over the water. "We must pass the watchers without drawing their full attention. If they decide we are a threat, we will not survive." The boat tilted slightly as the water dipped. Daniel steadied it again, his muscles tense. Another distant growl rolled through the cavern. This one was followed by a slow, steady tapping like claws against stone. It was coming from above them. Daniel's eyes flicked upward. And in the faint light from his lantern, he caught the shadow of something clinging to the ceiling. Moving slowly above the boat, he gritted his teeth. How many of these things are there? She didn't answer this time. Her silence was answer enough. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Finally, the current slowed, and the boat drifted into a smaller tunnel. The girl exhaled slowly, her shoulders lowering just slightly. "We're past the watchers," she said, though her voice held no relief. "But the path ahead will be worse." Daniel frowned. "Worse than that?" "Yes," she said simply, "because now, path belongs to them." Her gaze drifted upward toward the tunnel walls. Daniel followed her eyes and saw it marks in the ice. Long claw grooves carved into the frozen surface. "They hunt in packs here," she said, "and they don't fear the dark." They pulled the boat up onto a narrow bank. The air was so cold now, it made Daniel's skin ache. Ahead, the tunnel split into three, each one disappearing into shadow. The girl crouched low, running her fingers over the ice at the entrances. "This one," she said, pointing to the middle path. "It leads to the ice plains above. But once we take it, we will be exposed again." Daniel adjusted the strap on his pack. "It's the fastest way, we take it," he said. Her eyes met his for a long moment. "Then from this point on, every step is a step in open danger," she said softly. Daniel gave a small smirk, despite the cold. Wouldn't be the first time they stepped into the middle tunnel. Their footsteps soft on the frozen ground. Behind them, the faint sound of water faded away. Somewhere in the distance, a new sound began. A slow, high-pitched howl carried through the ice. The girl's grip on the crystal tightened. Daniel didn't need to ask what it meant. The hunt had already begun, and they were the prey. The icy tunnel opened into blinding white. Daniel squinted against the sudden light as he stepped out onto the vast ice plains. The cold wind hit him hard, carrying fine snow that stung his skin. The alien girl stood beside him, her silver eyes scanning the endless horizon. Somewhere far ahead, black mountains rose like jagged teeth against the pale sky. "That's where the sanctuary is," she said, pointing toward the tallest peak. Daniel adjusted his pack. "How far?" "Half a day if we move fast," she replied, "but they will be close now." Her words proved true within minutes. From behind them, a faint blue light flashed on the horizon. Daniel didn't need to ask. He knew it was the soldiers, and from somewhere in the wind, that same chilling howl from the tunnels rose again. Predators and soldiers both were coming. They moved quickly, their boots crunching in the hard snow. The open ground left them exposed. Daniel kept glancing over his shoulder, watching the blue lights draw nearer. The girl's pace didn't falter, but her grip on the crystal in her hand was tight every few steps. She looked toward the mountains as if willing them to come closer. Hours passed in tense silence until the ground began to rise. The slope was steep, the ice beneath their feet slick. Daniel's legs burned with the effort, his breath fogging the air. Halfway up, the girl stumbled. Her knee hitting the ice, Daniel grabbed her arm and pulled her up. "You all right?" She nodded quickly, but her voice was breathless. "We can't slow down now." A sharp crack echoed from behind. Daniel turned and saw dark shapes moving fast across the plain. The soldiers were closer than he thought, close enough that he could see the reflection of light on their weapons, and in between them, moving even faster, low to the ground, were the hunting beasts. The girl's eyes widened. "They've brought the pack," she said, her voice grim, by the time they reached the base of the mountain. The wind had grown fierce. The mouth of a wide stone arch stood ahead. Carved into the mountainside, ancient symbols were etched into its surface. Daniel recognized some of the shapes. They looked almost like old human writing. "This is it," the girl said, stepping forward. She placed the crystal into a small slot at the center of the arch. A faint hum filled the air, and light began to ripple across the carvings. But the sound of pounding footsteps behind them cut through the moment. Daniel spun around to see the first wave of soldiers emerging over the ridge, blasters raised, their voices carrying through the wind. The girl looked at him sharply. "Hold. Them all Fae need time to open it." Daniel didn't hesitate. He dropped his pack, pulling out his rifle, and took position at the mouth of the arch. The first shots came fast, blue energy bolts slicing through the air. Daniel fired back, the recoil jolting through his arms. One soldier fell, but the others kept advancing. Snow sprayed into the air as their shots hit the ground around him. Behind him, the hum from the arch grew louder. The girl's voice rose in a strange chant, speaking words in her language. The light in the carvings spread outward, forming a circular pattern, but the beasts were close now. They're low, guttural growls echoing off the ice. Daniel caught sight of them darting between the soldiers, their massive bodies moving with terrifying speed. A blur of fur and claws leaped toward him. Daniel swung his rifle up, firing point blank. The creature crashed into the snow, sliding lifeless at his feet. Another followed immediately, and he barely managed to block its strike with the rifle stock. It knocked him backward, his shoulder slamming into the stone arch. The girl's voice grew more urgent, the light from the arch spilling out onto the snow. Daniel got back up, adrenaline pushing through the cold. He fired again, driving the soldiers back a few steps, but for every one, he slowed down. More appeared over the ridge. The pack of beasts circled, their yellow eyes fixed on him. It was only a matter of seconds before they attacked together. "Daniel!" the girl shouted. He turned to see her standing in the archway, the crystal glowing in her hands. "The gate is ready to come now." Daniel took one last shot at the soldiers before sprinting toward her. A beast lunged, catching his coat in its teeth. But he ripped free, stumbling into the circle of light. The girl pressed the crystal into his hands. "Place it here only you can," she said, pointing to a small human-shaped imprint at the arch's center. Daniel slammed it into place, and the ground trembled. The circular pattern of light spun rapidly, and a blinding white glow erupted around them. The soldiers shouted. In alarm, the beasts growled, but none of them dared step closer. A wave of force pushed outward from the arch, knocking the attackers back into the snow. The light swallowed everything, and for a moment, there was only silence. When Daniel's vision cleared, they stood inside a vast, warm chamber. Golden light filled the air, and towering structures of crystal and stone surrounded them. The girl turned to him, her silver eyes softening. "You did it," she said. "You brought me home." Daniel looked around, still catching his breath. "So, what now?" She stepped closer, placing her hand over his. "Now," she said quietly, "you are part of my people's future." And for the first time since that cold night began, Daniel realized he hadn't just saved her life, he had changed both of their worlds forever.